know, you might have to get down, Moon.
All right, excuse me, buddy. I know snack time's happening.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Can I sit down, please?
All right, get down. Come on.
Pussy.
All right.
I know. I had to push you out of the way.
Oh, drool.
Is that what all that is?
Yes, that's all Moon drool.
Oh, you missed it. Oh, your pants are now soaked.
Great.
I gotcha.
Great. Great.
Well, hey guys, welcome to the IronTrap Snack Cast. As Matt finishes up his afternoon, Matt and Moon finish up their afternoon snack. Thanks, guys.
We still need to do the pitch the idea of the Mexican, like the Barstool Sports
Yes.
does the pizza review.
Yes.
We kind of want to do Mexican.
One chip. It's a salsa review. He does the one bite challenge. We're gonna do the one chip challenge. Dip it
One
in
challenge.
Yeah.
Do you take a after one bite?
Yes.
Anyways,
this episode's demonetized for swear words right at the beginning.
you're gonna have to
Bleep all that out.
Beep all that out. But
Welcome to the IronTrap podcast. This is one of our video podcasts, but we do audio versions every week. You can get them on all of your favorite audio or podcast places, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, that kind of stuff. If there's one you can't get it on, please let us know, and I will do my best to add it to that app. Is there any other important stuff we need to cover?
nope. Just listen, subscribe,
Yep, all the
do
usual
all that
stuff.
good stuff.
If there's a topic you'd like us to cover, please send us an email. Stop us at a show. We had a ton of people stop us at Hershey. Gave us very good feedback on the podcast. Thank you to everyone that stopped. It was nice to hear good things about the podcast because I'm not very good at an audio engineer, and we had some very good feedback.
Yeah, so we do read the comments. Some people that watch the YouTube channel aren't as big of fans of this, but it's really also a good way for us to take the load off of ourselves of filming and putting out 3 videos a week every week. So this is a way we're doing it, and we know it doesn't get as many views, but it serves multiple purposes, and it's been good to get conversation going amongst our viewers, which is good. So today's topic
is
what is today's topic?
So today's topic, we're going to talk about the trends in hot rodding and if some of the former trends would ever become popular again. Right now, kind of post-war, late 40s, early 50s style of builds is insanely popular, and if we think some of the trends that came later would ever become popular again. And we're going to kind of discuss some of the...
Mike has a new puppy this summer, and Moon just realized that he smells like the puppy. So he's getting
inspected heavily today.
Drooled on and inspected. Moon, give him some space.
So let's talk about the current trend. So with a lot of the events that are being held now, Trog was probably one of the earlier trends that helped push that to become more popular.
I think it helped
push it into the mainstream.
Yes. There's a lot of events previous to that were that kind of got that all going. But I think that has helped. I think in the
last
the
10 years.
Yeah, 10, 15 years, probably 15.
Yep.
The kind of Dry Lakes, Bonneville era, early Bonneville, Dry Lakes era of hot rodding.
Say kind of like pre-55-ish?
Yeah, I'd say World War II era and post-war era hot rodding has been very, very popular. And, that's what I think is definitely still those types of vehicles are the ones that a lot of people are building, and those types of vehicles are bringing some money with that styling as far as hot rodding goes. Yep. So that's definitely been the trend. I mean, when you look at the early 2000s and 90s, late 90s, when kind of traditional hot rodding was taking off or having a resurgence again, it wasn't as fine with what the period was. You were just seeing cool kind of raw hot rods being built, and it was all different styles. It's just in the past like 15 years or so, you're seeing more of the nerdiness of my car is pre-48,
Yep.
and it only has parts from blah, 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 whereas I feel like in the earlier, in early resurgence of it, when you look at the cars and the people that were doing it, and I wasn't involved in that because a lot of that was in California when that was happening. But
Watch some early Mad Fab videos.
yes, look at those. You will see a lot of the guys. It was Caddy engines, Olds engines.
Yep.
They were building stuff that was probably more of a 50s style or 60s style car. But over the years, it's gotten into this period correct 40s era dry lake.
Quote unquote traditional hot rod.
Yes, which is traditional hot rodding is much broader than that, for sure.
It's a very blanket era, but guys use it to kind of explain that they build pre or post war hot rods. But it kind of, I mean, T-buckets are kind of traditional hot rods because they were
Correct.
done in the 70s, which I've had arguments with people about that too. Like,
Well, I mean, the 70s is probably beyond the traditional scope, I would say, what most people say. But I think
Yeah.
pre-64 and earlier hot rodding is usually what most people consider. But again, the Cookie T is the first famous T-bucket,
Yeah.
and that was built much earlier than the 70s. So, but I think that's been the thing that's been sticking around, that people are really, the early days of hot rodding where it was really pure and simple, and stuff was not so powerful that it was crazy. I think you're seeing a lot of that because it's like to build a car that has, when you get into the 50s and cars were having blown overhead valve engines that were really wild, those cars are a handful. So I think there's something to be said about a little flathead that doesn't make that much power. You can't really get into that much trouble with a flathead, so to speak. So that, I think that, and like the old saying goes, it's more fun to go fast in a slow car.
yes.
So that's the epitome of a flathead or four banger. It feels a lot faster than you're going.
Yes.
And that's, I think, what you see with that. So I think that's what's opened it up. You're seeing a lot of people doing the nostalgia drag racing and dirt racing and different stuff like that, because you're going fast, but you're not really going that fast. I mean, I go these nostalgia 8th mile drag races. I go faster in my Roadster on the street than they're doing in those drag races. Or maybe the fastest cars that are doing those 8th mile drags are maybe getting to 70 miles an hour if they're lucky. So it's like, it's kind of safe. You don't, you're wide open throttle, but you're not. It's not like you're in a real, a 50s car where the cars can go much quicker.
Yeah, exactly.
So that part of it, I think, has helped. But I think that's the trend of that currently is still sticking. But you're starting to see more the 70s T-buckets and stuff like that.
Yeah. T-buckets have definitely not come back, but you're seeing guys building them, and I feel like that's part of a generation that kind of grew up with them.
Yeah.
Hi, Moon. They're now getting to the point in their life where they have the ability to buy one or build one. So you'll see some of that stuff become a little bit more popular because.
Come here. Hey, leave me alone. Over here. Sit down.
Because they have more disposable income or time to build something that they saw while they were, like, our friend Jason is super big into like early customs and flamethrowing, because that he was like around during the late 80s, early 90s. He was like ingrained in that culture.
So that was like that version of the early traditional stuff kind of coming back, or it never ended. But the cars that were on the East Coast in the 90s that were going around with all the chopped Mercs and stuff, and they were doing the flamethrowing, like that's the version of hot rodding and custom cars that he really identifies with. I don't understand it, or it's not my favorite thing, but he goes nuts for it because that's what he grew up and remembers. And I think that's what a lot of this stuff is. Some of us, like myself, didn't grow up going to hot rod shows when I was a kid because my father wasn't into them. So I kind of just found what I liked organically, so to speak. But yeah, you're seeing people finding the T-buckets and, 90s and 80s customs and redoing them because that's now, those are old.
Now, do you think the Wacky era that kind of came about in the late 50s into the 60s will become like trendy again? Guys building like wild show cars, or do you think that has kind of passed?
The one trend I couldn't foresee coming back is the wild show cars of the 60s and 70s that Barris and a lot of the customizers were doing. I just can't see. Those cars were so unpractical then and even more so now. And I feel like the indoor car show circuit has died off a
Yeah,
lot.
definitely.
So there's really no reason. And you've seen a shift with the high-end shows where they make you drive the car. Like there's like a rule that the car has
Yeah,
to
that's true.
do a reliability run, or it has to start and drive into the show and all that stuff. So like some of those cars that those guys were building with, 3 blowers and all this, steamroller dually rear wheels and all that stuff, like those cars didn't even drive. They didn't really. They might have started, but they didn't do. You were seeing stuff that was like empty engines, and they were just so far from being a car. It was more of a piece of art or a sculpture that I can't foresee that coming back as a trend, at least.
In hot rodding, because I feel like it's a trend in other parts of the automotive hobby, because like lowriders, they're like building these insane works of art where everything's.
But a lot of them drive. A lot of those cars do.
That's true.
They do drive and they do cruise those cars and they do run, because a lot of those cars are just putting a LS or a small block in them, and it's more about
the
making
gold plating and the engraving on
all
everything.
the functional items are
Yeah,
dolled
that's
up.
true.
So I don't know if I'm sure there's some instances where that's true, but I think a lot of those cars actually do drive. Now maybe they don't get driven a lot because they're so nice.
Well, yeah, they have
but
$100,000 in gold plating on the car. I wouldn't want to drive it either.
yeah, exactly. But I think that era I could see not really coming back. But I think anything that's usable is open for its time in the limelight again. I just think that the early hot rodding and customs are subdued and they're timeless, and there's no. It's just one of those things. Like it's like a good pair of blue jeans. Like their jeans are always going to be a thing, and people are going to come out with wacky versions of it. But like the old school Levi's is going to be classic and always something that in style that people will wear, and so it's like hot rods are like an old pair of jeans. It's just like they're always going to be looking good. They're always going to be in style, and maybe they won't be as popular. But I feel like even in the 80s, some of the old guys I talked to that were going to shows and saw all the changes over these years, when a cool old hot rod came in that was done in the early style, people still were looking at it and appreciating. It wasn't like they were like, get out of here with that 32 Roadster with a flathead. It was just,
where's your Boyd billets and tweed interior?
So I feel like they're always going to be, and that's what I found over the years. I've been more drawn to a lot of the cars that are subdued and timeless, and and that's, I had a lot of people when we were at Hershey that were kind of like saying that about the DeLorean Roadster. They were like, the thing's just simple. It's just like, and I'm like, that's what it is. Like less is more with that car. It's just it's just right. And I feel like that's the part that's kind of fun with these early style traditional cars, the World War II era or post-war, where it's just like, it's just simple. You don't need to do anything real crazy with them. And that's where I feel like some of the trends in the modern interpretation of traditional cars, or even the post-war and World War II era style cars, people are using the car as a place to hang every rare part in the planet. And it's not, you wouldn't have seen a car really like that. You see
true.
some guys with cars that, yes, everything's period correct, but they have so much hung on the car with rare stuff that it's kind of like detracts from the car. Like, I think the less is more. So if you have I don't know, that, super rare magnesium wheels with the super rare this and that, and every single piece of the car, it's more about the parts than it is about the overall look
Yeah.
of the car. So I struggle with that myself. My 33 three window with the Arden and stuff, like, I wanted to put every freaking rare thing I had on it. And then it's kind of like, well, you know what? It's like I put those magnesium Halibran Indies on it and set them up with them. Like, it's just too much. Like, it's
Yeah.
like it's too much. And it's like, and you went back to steel wheels with like the milk truck style wheels that in the back that are rare, but they're not as like in your face. And you're like, oh, all right, that kind of like now the car just it all flows.
Yeah.
So that's the part that I've been seeing. It's interesting is the rare parts flex game.
Yeah.
Has gotten so crazy that guys are like,
It's just everyone trying to one up each other.
So
Like,
it's-
oh, you got a rare set of heads. It's the same as them building wacky show cars.
That's true.
They're just every year they're trying to one up what they did. That's how those show cars really originated, because there was the same car. They just every year they tried to change something to make it
right.
quote unquote better, which usually was not the case.
Yeah, so I can appreciate a car with all the rare parts in the planet, but sometimes I think it does a disservice to the whole car because I don't appreciate the rare parts on their own as much, or the car as a whole, because it's like it's just too much going on. So, I mean, that's the way I'm going to use an excuse why I have so many cars.
Yeah, you gotta. I can't put all the good shit on one vehicle.
One
I gotta
car.
spread it around.
I have to have 20 cars with good stuff on them. That's my excuse. That's what I'm telling myself this week. But yeah, you're kind of seeing a lot of that. The other interesting thing with the traditional stuff that's the trends that are going around is I think, there's been a neat change in some of these shows that are high end that are becoming, they're like a traditional, so to speak, show, and it's like real high end customs and hot rods, and it's like I almost hesitate to use traditional anymore,
They're traditional on the outside.
but that's why, if you guys notice, I use the word nostalgic a lot more on our channel these days, because I love those cars, but they're nostalgic cars. They're nostalgic hot rods. Because when you start putting a small block Chevy with, yes, the valve covers look old, or you started with a 283.
We'll call it a modern small block Chevy, because a lot of them are like not even early 50 or early 50s and 60s small blocks. They're putting like,
Yeah, you put a 350 in it,
Yeah.
but they're dressing it up, and then but either way, you're putting not picking on small blocks, but they're putting a 5-speed or a
Yep.
6-speed underneath of the car, and you dress it with the right wheels, and they put the bias look tires and all the stuff. Like, the car looks killer. Don't get me wrong; they're beautiful, but really, it's a nostalgic hot rod. They're everything on it they're doing is to make it. It's a street rod. It's the same as doing a street rod in the early 2000s.
Yep.
With better paint, and they're hiding the modern stuff better.
Yeah.
You put a power gen on.
it's a different flavor of street rod.
Yes,
That's all it is.
it's doing. I mean, they look way better, but it's the same thing, and they're doing it to make them more drivable. I'm also saying that you have to choose what you want to do, because if you're doing a truly traditional hot rod, it is a lot harder to drive one of those cars. The distance or the highway speeds and everything that modern cars now do.
Yeah.
So it's a little harder. So it makes sense for those cars, but you're seeing these shows that are more like that. So the Gathering at the Rock is a fantastic show that's really high end, and you're seeing some great cars there. And a lot of those cars, they fall in that category. It's a beautiful car, real high end, has a lot of really good parts, but a lot of them have I shouldn't say a lot of them, but some of those cars, the high end ones, they have that modern stuff underneath, and it's just another version of all of this stuff that is the nostalgia, hot rodding and customs, and that it's like you said, it's no different than the early, the street rod stuff that they were doing. So I think that's kind of a neat take on it. At least when you're doing it, they're hiding it, and the car still has the look and simplicity of a 40s era, 50s era build, which is cool, because then the cars are still nice to look at.
Yeah, very nice to look at.
But I don't know if there's been a lot of talk with different friends of, like, is the Boyd era of type of cars, or are people going to start?
80s street rod. We're doing like the crazy
Yeah.
wild graphics on the side, tweed interior.
Yes.
And it might, because I have a bunch of friends that are into mini trucks, and
Mm-hmm.
I follow that scene a little bit. That's coming back. Dudes are
True.
buying Boyd billets and they're doing retro style paint jobs, and I hope it doesn't come back to hot rodding, because it's like some of that stuff is so tasteless to me, like the pastel colors, and it does not do it for me whatsoever. But there's different strokes for different folks.
Are people going to be chasing like an 80s ZZ Tops type paint car?
I mean, there's guys doing that with like 80s drag cars that are
True.
like, they're hunting down old drag cars or that old style build.
But I feel like race cars have always been that way. Famous race cars, people.
Well, not even famous race cars. They're hunting down just an old race car with that look, because that's what they're after. Same thing we're doing with barn find, early
Yeah, but I feel like
Fords.
race cars people have always hunted old race
Nostalgia
cars.
stuff, yeah.
Even if they're not usable, just to put them on display. But like, I just don't know. I don't know if we'll see tweed interior,
I hope not.
bubble paint, pastel colors, if that will come back or not. I mean, currently you're seeing a lot of people buying those types of cars for affordable,
Yes.
and turning them back into a nostalgic hot rod or
And a lot of those were nostalgia hot rods.
full circle.
Yeah, they were some dude's car back in the the 60s, and he changed it with the times, and then someone buys it from him and takes it back to probably how he had it back in the back in the day when he was a teenager.
But yeah, the other trend that I've noticed that is, and I'm so pumped that it's more accepted, is the people understanding and respecting the survivor car thing.
Yes.
Even at the local level, and I don't know about everybody else, but like myself, even at the local level, I've been noticing some of my local cruise-ins and stuff that I once in a while go to, guys showing up with like survivor cars or cars that they bought. And they're like, you know what? I think I'm just going to drive it like this and maybe fix a few things. For instance, there's a car that comes with a bunch of our local cruise-ins. I think you saw it. It's a 33 three-window
Oh, it was blue.
that a guy, older gentleman, his brother built it when he was a kid, his older brother. And this guy's got to be I would say he's in his mid-60s maybe.
Yeah.
Could be late 60s, not sure. And he said his brother built it when he was a kid in like the early 60s or something. And then his brother sold it, and the guy that bought it kept it all these years. And the car's an old, not like a super beautiful hot rod, but it's an old like high school hot rod. And it's got a 265 in it, early small block in it, with the stock. It's very much like the Skelly car, where it's like stock trans, stock rear with a 265, chrome garnish molding, unchopped, cool blue paint, but the lacquer is flaking.
Yep.
And and he just drives it. He like got it running and driving, and I've seen him at like all these shows. And like previously he would have been in the 80s or 90s he would have been like shunned, or like people turning their nose at you for showing up with a car that has flaky lacquer paint and doesn't make big power or have drag slicks on or whatever. And like now everybody floods that car. Like every time I see him at a cruise-in or a show and he rolls in, people like are just attracted to that car because you can just tell it was done a very long time ago. And he's like leaving it alone, which I love. I go and talk to the guy like every time I see him because I'm like trying to reinforce. I'm like, please don't
Do not touch this.
do not sand this car down and make it flat black. Like just leave the old cool old blue paint. And
we're starting to see that in a lot of, Hershey just happened. AACA now has a preservation class.
Yep.
The early Ford early Ford Club has the, I can't think of it.
HPOA.
I forget. It's got its own name. I can't remember it.
Yeah.
But they have a class for cars that are as found, similar to AACA preservation. And it's neat to see that they're allowing cars that may not have 100% perfect paint and just as found condition brought out to these shows for people to enjoy. Now, I wish the AACA had a hot rod class, but that's another topic we'll talk about another day.
I've bitched about that numerous times.
Yeah. But it's the preservation of just finding old cars, keeping them the way they are is, I think, way more important than anything, because that even if you find an old T-bucket, just keeping it the way it was is just, it's preserving how hot rodding's changed over these years, and just
Right.
you're saving that time capsule.
Yeah, so that probably is the biggest thing that has changed, but people are accepting of. That yeah, they definitely see that. And I met a guy at our hotel. My dad and I were getting ready to leave, and a guy walked up. Two guys walked up to us, just had conversation, and the one guy had both of them I think had early Fords, but the one gentleman had a 32 Packard, and he educated me on a new model I never knew of, a shovel nose Packard.
Oh, he was at the booth, I think.
Yeah. So that guy, he's like, oh no, it's like an original Survivor, like it's like old paint and whatever. And like I'm like, wow, a Packard guy that's not like that has to be perfectly restored. Like
Yeah.
the higher end cars you normally think of that being a thing. And he's like, and it's not that it's not a valuable Packard, but it's not like $1 million Packard. So
Yeah.
like he could easily have restored that car and it wouldn't have mattered. But the fact that people were more accepting of, let me keep this car, enjoy it how it is, and we kind of go to great lengths, far beyond what most people are doing, and I hope that we're inspiring other people to do that, like the DeLorean car, the Schroll car, a bunch of these cars I've done where I'm carefully bracing the car, cutting all the rust out, getting paint, blending the paint in to match it, and making the car look like it was stored better than it was. And I hope more people start doing that.
The amount of people at Hershey that were enthralled with that we didn't touch the DeLorean car, just people that had no idea who we were.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of old dudes that came up. They were like, I am so happy to see a 32 Roadster that's like this, that looks how it would have looked back in the day, that it's aged and just looks amazing. There was a bunch of old dudes that were like, thank you for not just sanding it down and painting it. This is way better to look at.
Yeah, would you stop? You're sleeping. Leave it alone. And that's like the biggest compliment when we do these cars, when people walk up and they have no clue. They're like, man, where'd you find this thing? It's in such great shape. And I'm like, well, it wasn't in that great a shape.
Yeah.
But like, you're able to do repairs, and repairs age in, and the blending of the paint ages in after you drive the car enough that no one would know. And sometimes I forget that, what all I've done. So like, I think those trends are becoming more, or hopefully maybe not trends, but people are respecting that a little more. And I go to great lengths. It's one of my like fascinations, is finding original or old paint stuff, old chrome. And that's why we collect a lot of what we do, because when you put a car, if you get a car like the Schroll car, the Dorian car, or any of the other ones we've done that are like, old builds, if it's missing some of the parts, that's why I have all these old chrome and old parts, because you start putting them on the car and they just look like they were there forever. Maybe that car had a chrome coil back in the day, and if you put a brand new chrome Petronics coil on the firewall, it just looks weird. So if you
sticks out like a sore thumb.
So that's why we do that, and that's part of the whole Hershey and Carlisle and hunting for parts in barns, is finding those pieces that have the age, and it's off another car, but it's perfect for your car. And that's the other layer of this whole traditional thing and nostalgia hot rodding for me, that it's really fun, is taking those pieces and putting them on a car, and it just looks like it was there forever.
Yeah.
So I think that's way, 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 way more appreciated this day, and now it's becoming very coveted. I mean, I think that in the traditional thing, like the DeLorean car for me is, me and a lot of people that are into that stuff, that's it. Like, that car is the real deal, and I think people are way more responsive to that it's the real deal, old hot rod or old build or whatever, and people are chasing that stuff now.
Yeah.
Which I think is cool. While the Brookville 32 is great, and lots of guys do that, I think there has been a shift where people are kind of like building an old car with old parts is definitely, it was like a smaller crowd, and I think more people are appreciating that. And it's just.
Is there any trends or styles that you wish people would do more of?
I wish the 50s and early 60s show rods, custom rods, I should say. Maybe not show rods like we were saying, the Barris cars, but like the show rods.
what those show cars started out as originally.
Yes. So much like what I'm doing with the Sweetheart Roadster, is a car that is done in a style that would have been done in maybe the later 50s, early 60s, where it's kind of like a little more flashy but still cool. I don't see as much of that. And it might be because the early dry lakes and World War II era hot rods, they don't take, because this is what these people were doing then, they don't take a lot of skill to build a basic hot rod. I mean, that's what you see with a lot of the Race of Gentlemen type stuff. You can take a car that's got old paint and put a flathead in it with some heads and different stuff, and you can just go and it's done. It looks cool. Again, it's timeless. I'm all for it. When you get into that other stuff, it's way more skill level. To build a show rods type car, you have to do a lot of like what I'm doing, where you're making pieces and you're customizing, you're letting, and a lot of thinking outside the box. Where I think that's why it hasn't taken off as much.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that more, where there's more people that are doing a little bit more of that over the top type stuff. With the drawer pulls in the grill and some of that. I would love to see. Now you're seeing a little more channel cars. People are doing channel cars a little more. They've become the East Coast look. I've seen come back a little bit where people are building
channeled unchopped cars.
I mean, you look at Cody that's doing that 3-window. I think he's going to set the world on fire with trends.
I mean, he didn't already set it on fire when it was in bare metal, but now it's.
I think when it's done, he's doing like that 50s, type of build that I feel like would have been, over the top, but still cool.
Yeah.
Channeled real hard, and a fast engine in it that's that's flashy and lots of chrome. So like his car, I'm super excited about seeing that debut done, because it's it's just so over the top. So it'd be cool to see more people doing something like that, where you're doing more than just a highboy, a copy of another highboy that was done, So I would like to see more of that, and that's the Sweetheart Roadster's been my attempt at that. I just have so many projects I haven't completed it, but we're on our way. I think that would be cool, and I've seen the trends as far as customs go. You're seeing a lot more people that are emulating the earlier style customs, and we're getting a lot of beautifully chopped and padded top, chopped hard top cars, but also padded top convertibles and stuff that are being done. I feel like Carson tops is something that you don't see as much, and I would love to see more of that on some of the fat fendered cars, and that's my plan for the 38 convertible, is to build a Carson style top, padded top on it. That's something I don't see as much of. You see, one of the trends has been the padded, hard chopped 32 to 34, or even 32 to 36 convertibles. Dave Martinez is ruling the scene with one of the guys, Fireball Roadster.
Another one.
Paul, he's been ruling the scene forever on that. Those guys really, every single time, nail it. There's plenty of other people that are doing it, but those guys are, I think the cars that they've done are high profile, and they've kind of everybody wants to do a chop that's
definitely set the bar.
So it's kind of funny, because my car, the DeLorean Roadster, was done similar way, but isn't chopped quite as hard or the same profile as those guys are doing necessarily. But it's that same style, and I almost feel like a dork, like I'm following the trend. But I'm like, that's what the car had. I swear. I'm not.
Here's a picture from 1950. I swear.
Yeah, I got to keep it with the car. I'm like, I swear. But it's cool seeing that, because that was one of those things I feel like people were missing with the convertible. A lot of the convertibles is they weren't getting the top look right, and some of the nostalgia cars early on. But now, I think everybody gets it, and you're seeing all these freaking beautifully chopped convertibles, early convertibles that are being done. But I would love to start seeing more Carson top. And with some of these fat fender cars getting more affordable for convertibles, you may start seeing more of that, where people are buying a 39 Deluxe convertible or a 40 convertible and chopping it and doing a padded top or a folding chop top, because they really, really helps the look of them, as we proved with the 38. Tons of guys are doing that, before us, that are proving that. But I think you're starting to see that more. But I'd love to see some Carson tops. That would be pretty neat, to start seeing, some of that stuff being done. But now, do you think, as far as like the outlying part of the hot rodding is racing? I feel like there's a lot more people getting into, whether it's land speed racing, drag racing, circle track racing. I feel like that's been in the recent maybe 5 years.
Yeah, I think there's just more events. People are putting more events together. I mean, in the summer on any given weekend, you could be within, 300-400 miles of a vintage or nostalgia racing event, just about anywhere in the country.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing more people putting cars together to do that, which is pretty cool. But it feels like there's a lot more people that are doing that. And even like land speed racing.
It definitely feels like there's a big resurgence in that.
I think there's always been a ton of people doing it, obviously. But like, I think because, and this is one of probably the good things with social media. I'm burnt out on social media a lot, but like, everybody's documenting their trip to Bonneville.
Yes.
And now it's become, even more than it was in previous years, cool to drive your car out of Bonneville, get your photos driving on the salt flats, and all of that, which is great. But what I think is happening is those people go 1 or 2 years, and then you're like, man, it'd be neat to drive a car, like actually race a car here. And then you're starting to see, I mean, there's countless people I could follow on social media that you see they went 2, 3, 4 years with their car and just drove out and spectated and hung out, and now you look and they just bought a car and they're having this guy put a cage in it, and they're or this guy used to was doing work for guys that were putting cars on the salt flats, and then now they have a car. So it's like super cool to see that the timeline of that stuff, and you definitely get the itch, like everybody says. You go to Bonneville or you go to Dry Lakes a handful of times, and you want to build something to go fast. But it's kind of interesting because I've talked about many times, I'm not super, for myself, into owning and having a race car because of the build up to race it once or twice a year. I don't get satisfaction out, and I get a lot of anxiety if the car doesn't work or something happens. So I find it interesting because it's very expensive. It's a lot of time, and then especially with the Bonneville and land speed racing, it's not just like a drag strip where you just show up and you just run your car tomorrow. You got to show up. You got to do the bailout. You got to get your licenses. There's all this stuff to just even. Which is great because they make you, they're making sure that it's safe as possible and all that. But like, there's a lot of steps to even. And you might have to go 1 year or 2 years and bring your car, and it doesn't pass tech, or you don't, the stuff isn't right, and then you take it home and bring it back the next year.
And Bonneville, they only hold 2. I think there's only 2 events a year, right?
Something like that, yeah.
And you're very say if you're into drag racing, there's 100 events. If it rains 1 year, it's no big deal. Everyone that goes out for Speed Week, like last year, it was totally rained out. They didn't race at all. Yeah. All that preparation and getting the car ready, and then you go all the way out there, and then you can't even race the car.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So you definitely have to be into it. But I've noticed that there's more and more guys that are going out, and I think they're going out because of the fun of seeing other people going out to do the trip. And I mean, we'd see people all the time like, you got to go out, you got to do this. And like, I've done El Mirage a couple of times, and it's super cool. It's, and I'd like to do Bonneville to see it, but I don't see myself wanting to get a car or race just for that sheer fact of it's a lot to do to build up. But it's one of those things where I'd probably like to go and maybe help somebody work on a car, or be a helper. But the actual fact of owning a car and racing a car, it just doesn't, it's not something I see myself. But you're seeing a lot of other people be getting infected, and the race car thing, you're seeing so many people now that have cool street cars, and then they go to a nostalgia eighth mile drag event. Or Trog is, probably the biggest one for that. People go to Trog 1 year, and the next year they're building a Trog car.
Yep.
We have a lot of customers that whether their car makes it to Trog or they're just doing it as a pipe dream to start building a car. So I think that's happening at all these races. You go to a nostalgic eighth mile flathead drags, and you watch. You go, man, that's fun. I could put one of them together. And next thing you know, you're out there running, and So it's pretty cool. And I'm seeing a lot of the one thing that is super cool is we're seeing so much family-oriented racing, because I think the eighth mile drags and the dirt drags are so safe and so laid back and fun. It's not as serious. You're seeing a ton of father and son, grandfather and grandson, father and daughter, wife and husband, all that stuff. And it's so cool. The ones I've gone to where you see, I know there's one at Allentown I went to, and it was a guy had to be in his 80s, and he was racing a flathead roadster, and his I think it was his grandson was with him, and they were hanging out, and they were, I talked to them for a bit because they were having, grandpa was having a little bit of trouble off the line or something, was breaking up. So I'm sitting there talking with him, trying to diagnose it, and the grandson's just learning. So he was like, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. Grandpa always teaches him. But it's just so cool to see that. And then the drags up in Maine, there was teenage girls running.
Yeah.
It's that stuff is amazing, because the drag racing is so fun and safe, and I like the fun aspect. I don't, people get too serious with real drag racing.
And I think with any type of quote unquote real drag racing, the cost to get into anything to not even just be competitive, but be safe and have fun it's just so much more expensive. You can put a hot rod, a rail together for very little money. Just slap a bunch of junk together, and you're not going fast enough to really be dangerous, and you can have fun, and it's
not that serious. Everybody goes, and they're just going to race for the fun of it, for the thrill of it. And it's not to win a points championship.
There are some people that go out to do that.
Yeah.
The vast majority are there to just have fun.
But everybody's I feel when I go to those events, it's very much opposite to when I've ever gone to a real drag racing event where nobody wants to talk to each other. Or, the guys are kind of being secretive, and everybody's kind of putting their game face on. At these fun drag races and track events, everybody's trying to help each other out. It feels like the swap meet culture at these races, because everybody's real friendly and helping each other and just, whatever. So that aspect of it I love. I think it's really cool, and that's what's growing that aspect of it. And it's just neat. You can have your street car that you drive around in and have fun in, and then you can put a little T together, a little A roadster, and put a hot flathead in it, and have a lot of fun with it, and you can work on it, and you're not spending $1 million.
I mean, or you just race your street car like a lot of people do.
They do.
If you have a just down and dirty hot rod, you just take it to the event and beat on it, and then drive it home and have fun.
But it's the typical story. Everybody gets infected. So you might do that the first time. The second time, you go, you know what? It'd be cool to build something with open pipes and a rail or whatever, and then you see guys bring that. So one guy in our area, Barry, he has a bunch of really cool street cars, and he recently built just a full-time nostalgia drag. I think it's an A or a T.
Oh, I get the head this time? Hi, buddy.
Little cut down. So, Moon, my God.
He smells like a new puppy. Oh, my goodness.
Okay, Moon. Can you lay down, please? Hey. You're interrupting our podcast here, buddy.
Are you kidding me? He's the star of the podcast. Everyone's going to be so excited he's on the couch the whole time.
So that, I think the drag racing and dirt racing portion, I think, has gotten really popular, and it's, I'd love to see more of that. It's also kind of cool because you're seeing some of this rare old speed equipment that is normally on the shelf. Guys are, Hillborn. Yeah. It's giving them an excuse to use it. You're like, well, now I'm taking a car to the drag. I built a little drag car. Well, now I can put a blower or a crazy cam, or, I could put, injection on it, and you have an excuse to use it.
Or like Max from H&H with that crazy 4-cylinder overhead valve conversion, like those Indy engines.
Well, Max is serious.
Well-
Max is going out to beat everybody.
Yeah,
He does
but I
beat
mean,
everybody.
he's actually using that old stuff, and like it's not just
Yeah,
sitting in
yeah,
a
yeah.
museum.
Yeah.
Yes, he is going out to beat everyone.
He just kicks everybody's ass.
Yeah.
He's pretty good. But yeah. So you're seeing it just in general. You're seeing I think you've seen a lot more of that, and it's not necessarily like the serious quarter mile top fuel type drag racing. It's just this grassroots stuff that's like
flag drop, 8th
yeah,
mile.
way more my style. Like very. I can just I can make a decision the night before to bring my car.
Or make a decision there if you're going to race or not.
Yes, like I did. Yeah. So that part of it I think is pretty cool, and it's neat to see that going on. I've been noticing a lot more reliability run stuff kind of going on with some of the events.
Yeah.
Having that, and some of the car show events are becoming more culture based, even more so than before, where it's like people are arriving 3 days before the show. They do shop parties, reliability runs, and then the show's kind of like that's okay, we're there, we're all going to go to the show, but
Yeah.
like really you're going for all the other stuff, and that's kind of neat to see that more places are doing that. But you're seeing more of these, like I feel like in California there's been these like roadster runs and reliability runs have been going on since like the 50s that are still going. But you're seeing it around the country now where more
Yeah.
people are doing those type of runs. And I've always thought that would be neat in our area to do like a fall foliage run, through the countryside
yeah.
and stuff like that. So like it's, and I'm sure there's probably people that do it, little clubs and stuff like that. But that's the kind of stuff that I think is neat. Getting the cars out, driving them around, no big reason to do that. And I think that's a shift I've seen in the trends is where it was like I get my car to take it to Good Guys, to show it for the weekend and sit in my chair, and then I drive it home. And
Those are all the miles I put on it for the year.
Yeah, and I've always been the opposite of like I'm driving my car to visit a friend. I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to run it around and, whatever, or drive it to the swap meet and put it in the parking lot and then drive it home. So like seeing more of that where the people were getting together to use the car, and you're not really going to a show. Everybody might pull into the same restaurant during the reliability run and hang out. And I think you're seeing more of that. I don't know. I think the Good Guys and the big car show crowd will always be, it's never going away. But I think you're seeing it's more inviting for most
outsiders.
Yeah, for most people to do that. Are you seeing more? Do you think there's more with the types of cars people are picking to work with or on, or?
Definitely. I mean, the price of early Fords obviously have gone up, so I do feel like there's more.
But you talk to some people, they're way down.
Oh yeah, it depends on who you're talking to.
Who you're talking to.
So I do feel like there's people building quote unquote more off-brand stuff, which is cool. I mean, any old hot rod, regardless if it's Ford bodied or made with a Chevy. One of our good customers, Barry, has a killer 32 Chevy.
Possibly the best 32 Chevy
Yes.
I've seen built in recent times.
So I think there is some more people using more off-brand stuff because it's probably a little easier to find for a deal.
Yep.
And that's super cool because it's all just killer hot rods being built regardless of what's on it. So I think that's definitely becoming a little bit more popular. They're just a little harder to find parts for sometimes. But
yeah, I think because we had a customer, or not even a customer, a viewer that showed up on Thursday as we were packing up.
Yeah.
There was a young guy, and he was telling us how he'd watched our channel and we inspired him, and he bought a 30-something
32 Plymouth, I think.
Plymouth, I think it was, coupe, and he was going to build a hot rod out of it. And he was all excited, and like that's what he could afford and what he could find. And I think he was telling me that he went with his like grandfather to look at like a Grand Page or some kind of neat car, and he said this was the cheapest car that was there, and he went with his grandfather looking at an old car and bought this car. But like we kind of with the channel, he was getting inspired to build old style, old timey type hot rod or custom, and he bought that, and that's cool to see because it's like you don't have to feel like it's this. I think there has been with social media. One of the things I don't like is that you see this like if you don't have a a 34 3-window hard chopped, you ain't shit. Like
Yeah, the cool kid.
the cool,
club.
yeah, and like that's where these higher end shows like Gathering at the Rock and some of these shows that are more, like for instance, Gathering at the Rock, that's their goal is to have the best cars. So I
Yeah.
get it. That's you're gonna see the best cars there, and that's what's gonna be there. You're not gonna see a 32 Plymouth with a Hemi in it, that's built by a kid. You're going to see the high end stuff. So I get that, but there's a lot of room in the hobby for him, a kid like that to build something like that, and him to have a lot of fun. And maybe he wants to own a 34 Roadster, a 33 Roadster, or a chopped Merc, but it's not in the budget. Just like myself, it wasn't in my budget when I started, and I was starting with a Model A or junky scraps of metal, and then you work your way up. So yeah, I think I agree. You're seeing more of that, but you're seeing more of like people are doing them right, I would
Yeah.
say, because I feel like in the past, people that built off-brand stuff, they had like a chip on their shoulder that they had to make it so different because it was a Chevy or whatever.
Into a rat rod.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, man. But like Barry's car, that is like freaking perfect. It's got a Caddy engine in it. It's just, he had a good eye and he did a good job with it. So like seeing more of that would be really cool because honestly, some of the other brands had really beautiful cars.
And are bigger on the inside. 32
Yes.
Plymouth is a lot larger inside than a 32 Ford. So if you're a big dude like me, Plymouths aren't that bad. They actually have a lot more leg room inside of them.
And a lot of those cars had like really cool hoods, with like vents and like the Chevys and some of the GMs that had the doors on them, chrome doors on them. Like,
And they had good flowing, like a 32 Plymouth has a good flowing back end. Like the way that everything flows is really cool. Now, again, some of those cars are harder to find in coupe form because they were more marketed in like 4-door, 2-door sedan, that kind of stuff. But I mean, there's plenty of those that they'll catch your eye if they're built right as a hot rod.
yeah, and I think you're seeing more, I shouldn't say more, but you're seeing a lot of people that are building cars from scraps.
Oh,
so to
100%.
speak. I feel like with YouTube and social media allowing the average guy or gal to learn how to do metal shaping and welding, someone like myself that worked at Eastwood that was doing videos teaching people, basics of welding for so many years, that is helping people start projects that they might have been scared to do before because now you're getting the education for free to do that. And like our channel showing how we're fixing up cars that are broken and rusty. And now I feel like we're seeing more, especially with our sales that we're seeing. People are buying, we sell a Roadster cowl or we sell a Roadster cowl on a back half and, it needs rust repair, but guy or gal's getting into it for much cheaper. So I think you're seeing more of that. I think it's always been around, but we're seeing.
Yeah.
I feel like at least with our sales and stuff, you're seeing more of that type of stuff with the trends. How about like paint versus, this is a patina. Do you think there's less people painting cars beautiful now?
I would probably say yes because it's just so expensive. I mean, to paint a car now is, you have to take a second mortgage out to afford a nice paint job. I feel like it's becoming more normal just because of there's so many like survivor cars.
Yeah.
It's more normal. And we discussed that a million times with the DeLorean car. Anyone could have a nice paint 32 Roadster, but to have a 32 Roadster with that history, painting it would be a shame because it'll look exactly the same as a nice painted Brookville car next to it. So I feel like people are going to do more of a patina build for sure because of the cost, and it's a little bit more accepted now. Like we talked about, they're not going to get shunned at a show for not having nice shiny paint.
Right. And I think I myself, I'm trying to learn. People who watch our videos are probably noticing over the years I've been doing more paint gun work, more blending of paint, spraying paint on chassis, different stuff like that. Over the years, I've been trying to get better at using a paint gun and more comfortable because I would like to get to a point where I could do maybe a simple paint job on something myself. And I think, again, with the internet and YouTube, you're able to learn a lot and social media about body work and painting and things like that, that you can paint a car yourself more affordably. And especially with the nostalgia hot rodding thing, you can get away with a paint job that's not that super crazy paint job. It's just decent, and people will think it's cool.
And that's how most of these cars were back in the day.
True. Yeah.
Any old timer that you talk to, none of the cars, like, these were pieces of junk that they were, working. They were considered pieces of junk at that time. In the 50s, they weren't a 50s car. They were just, it's some old Model A, and it's been through 3 or 4 owners and body repairs, and the
money's tight. And
the photos in hot rod magazines are deceiving because they're in black and white. They're real small, and it's hard to see how the cars actually were. But most people you talk to, the only nice cars were the high-end show cars.
Stop. Man, it's literally the wind. Hey.
I must destroy.
There's nothing to destroy. Hey. Step out of it. Step out of it. Quiet. So, yeah, I think, but it would be cool. It would be neat to start seeing more and more of, if you have a car that's just totally rust and it doesn't have a good look. Like, for instance, the 38 convertible we're doing, I don't think that has a great look to it.
The chicken pox aren't attractive?
No. So I plan to paint that car. I don't think I'm quite there myself yet for a big car to paint it and it come out as nice as I would like. But I would like to get to a point in the future where I could maybe take a Model A coupe or a Roadster and spray it myself and have the skills to make it look half decent. I think I'm almost there, honestly, that I could do that. And it's not going to be an amazing, show car. But that's the great thing with this part of the hobby is people aren't as judgy with stuff. They just enjoy it as being a neat old hot rod or custom. And it doesn't have to be. It's just the difference when you're, if you show up to a place like your King Shit and your car's all wavy, that's a different thing, But if you're just, bringing it as it is, then it's cool. And that, like you were saying, that back in the day, that's what a lot of people were doing. They were just spraying the car themselves because it wasn't. People were driving aged jalopies back then, but I think for the most part, me talking to older friends, they weren't doing that because they wanted to. It's not like now where it's cool. Like, I feel like king shit when I rolled into Hershey with the DeLorean car, and everybody was looking at it because it was a patina aged 32 Roadster. But, like, back in the day, you weren't like, heck yeah, I got this rusty.
They were cobbling together junk because that's all they had or could afford.
And they probably wanted to paint it down the road, but they couldn't. So I think there's nothing wrong with painting this stuff in it. And that's where my head is. I'd like to, for a personal goal, I'd like to learn how to do body work and paint better than I can, or get more experience, because it would be neat to do a nice
It'd be nice for you to have a shiny car for once.
Yeah, I don't have any shiny cars.
No shiny cars.
It's like 3 right here.
Sorry, I had to throw that in.
Yep. So that I could see more people starting to do as this stuff comes full circle. But I definitely think for me, there's always been a line where a car goes from looking shitty and cool to just shitty, and that's where that 38 I just think it looks shitty, but, so I'd like to paint the car. But I think Mike's car, for a good example, did not have a good patina to it.
It looks like shit.
It just looked like shit. So sanding that one down and giving it a nice, simple paint job that isn't high end would be a good example of that.
That's a drastic improvement on that car. Drastic.
So, but yeah, I think, and as far as like the customs and stuff go, feel like that's always been painted as kind of what looks good. You're seeing more people rolling around in bare metal or primer or things like that. But
and with the customs, like we talked about the trends, I don't think there was ever really wacky trends with the customs that would never come back.
That era we were talking about with like that our friend Jason's into, where it's like that like 80s or 90s kind of shop to Merc, home done cars that had some modifications that maybe they were wild but weren't done well all the time. I don't know if that stuff I could see coming back, but as a trend at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think customs. I mean, the whole idea of a custom forever is to make the car look more elegant or better than
Yeah.
it did from the factory. So, all those cars are probably a little more timeless than you know, or the style has stayed similar
Yeah.
through the years. I
Yep.
mean, a chopped 49 to 51 Merc since
51.
Barris, it was put some out and people started going nuts. They're kind of been the same formula. It's just people maybe put a different grill in it, and there's a little less. But there hasn't been like an era where everybody's like, oh, let me do a barn find 49 Merc and chop it and just drive it as is. I
Yeah.
feel like that hasn't happened. I've seen a lot of with the customs, people taking shiny old restored or really nice original paint cars and doing light customization, maybe chopping the roof, blending the paint in,
Yep.
warming the engine up, putting a better rear in it, and that kind of stuff, which I think is amazing. It's the version of what we're doing with the ruined Roadster. There's shops all around the country doing that with customs, and it's kind of cool. I think it's neat. You see it so much with 3940 Mercs.
Oh yeah.
That seems to be the formula.
And 35.6s.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys 35.6 3 windows. They're turning them into tail draggers, and they're
starting with beautiful cars.
yeah. Which we've talked about that before. It's just less work for a shop, which I understand totally.
But that's kind of like the formula I have with the Mercury I have. I got a car that's shiny, but by no means perfect. It's got bumps and bruises, but it's still shiny. And if I can do some slight customization, I'm only repainting the roof. You're maybe just repainting some little areas you customize. And then the car's still shiny when it's done. And no, I don't think it's going to be some wild high-end custom, but I also did it myself.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what is neat, to see more of that with the custom stuff for people who are tackling it themselves and doing it. Again, with social media, it makes it way easier. I have much more confidence to chop my Mercury than I would if I wouldn't have been studying for the last 4 years. Guys sharing on the internet how they chop a Mercury, showing where they cut, how they cut, all the things they do, because it allows you to do that. So that's the great thing with social media. It's probably more quickly allowed trends to happen and occur, because it's like, a couple guys show how to do it, and now everybody's Bonneville chop.
Yeah.
It's the Rolling Bones kind of being open about how they build their cars and being them getting those cars out there and social media. Now all of a sudden within 2 years it's like every freaking 32 to 34 was getting hard chop Rolling Bones style, as they call it, which is really a dry lake style chop. In fact, there's a hot rod magazine that has an article that is like almost exactly how Rolling Bones chop their cars. So a lot of people think the Rolling Bones, phenomenal cars. I'm not talking shit on anything they do, but one of the trends in recent years that they kind of have made popular is the cutting in front of the windshield frame area and laying the whole windshield opening back when you chop a car, so that you don't have to add a section in the center of the roof. There is a Hot Rod Magazine article, and I don't remember what month and year it is, that literally shows that same exact style. They show cutting in front, leaning it back, or cutting the pillars and leaning them back, and then you don't have to add, and you're doing that hard Bonneville type chop. So it's like I always say over and over again with our talks, nothing's new. Everything's been done. We're just maybe putting our spin on it. Rolling Bones are doing a better job at probably doing those chops than most guys were doing back then.
Yeah.
And certainly the metalwork is much nicer and all that kind of stuff. But they're emulating. They've made a style popular that they're emulating from back in the day, and they're just making it better and perfecting it. So the styles and the good part is that some of the good stuff has very quickly, with all these chop customs, they're more people are doing them. So, Yeah, I think that social media is the answer for a lot of these trends that are coming and going and happening quickly.
So that's probably about it. I don't know if there's
I think we talked a lot.
yeah. So if there's any trends that you wish would come back, or any trends you wish that would never come back, please leave a comment down below or send us an email. Or we just love the open discussion that happens on our YouTube videos in the comments.
Yep.
Everyone talking back and forth. It's a cool little community. So if you have anything to add, please don't be afraid to share it down below.
And again, if you guys are watching this video, make sure you subscribe on the podcast side of the audio format, whether it's Spotify or Apple or however you listen to them.
Yep.
We actually do podcasts now weekly, and so we alternate where we do video ones every other week, but we are doing we're doing audio every week.
Yes.
So you can listen there if you want to listen to us babble and turn it on in the garage, or if you're driving to work and want to listen to us BS about car stuff, you can do it that way. And make sure you subscribe there and leave us a review if you like what we're doing.
Yeah,
So,
next Sunday we talk about Carlisle and Hershey, which just ended. So if you'd like to listen to that, next Sunday that podcast comes out. So that'll be audio only. So if you want to listen to it, head over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whichever you use. It'll be there.
all right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you following along as always. And next video will be something of us doing something cool, working on something,
Yeah.
hopefully. So thanks, guys.
See
Catch
ya.
you later.